So as I mentioned in the previous class that today I would first like to finish show you one more example of complex integration. So I will do that and then finish this part of the course and then go to some different topic. So the integral that we shall consider today is the following. It is integral 0 to infinity x to the power of alpha minus 1 gx dx, where this is a all this gx is a function of a real variable. So this is a real function, and it is also a rational function of x. By rational, I mean that it can be expressed as px by qx form, in the form px by qx, and it has no poles on the real x-axis. This function gx has no poles or singularities on the real axis. Okay, and this alpha is not an integer. This I'm not writing it anymore. So this alpha that you see here is not an integer. So what would be the way to do these integrals? So what we shall do is use complex variable analysis to evaluate this particular integral. So I would just like to give you the general result. The general result is the following: it is 2 pi I summation over residues divided by 1 minus e to the power of 2 pi I alpha. So the general result for this integral is the following. So how do you get the summation over residues thing? So you can by now you must have understood that to evaluate integrals of this form, these are integrals of over functions over real variable functions, right? Functions of real variables. But what we do is we go to the complex plane and write down functions of this kind, right? So x is a real variable, but now we just translate this to z to the power of alpha minus 1, and gx we translate it to gz, where z is now a complex variable. Okay. It is true that gx does not have any poles on the real x-axis, but the function g of z can have singularities, that is poles, on in the complex plane. So gz can have singularities in the complex plane because this is a function of a complex variable. So in general, it will have singularities. And please remember that alpha is not an integer. So now we put in another condition that this result is true if z. So let me call this function as f of z. So if it turns out that f of z tends to 0 uniformly as mod z tends to infinity as well as mod z tends to 0, then this result is true. So these are the conditions that it must satisfy. It must satisfy that f z tends to 0 uniformly as mod z tends to infinity and mod z tends to 0. Gz can have singularities in the complex plane, alpha is not an integer, and these are the conditions that are satisfied by the function f of z. So let's proceed. So the way out is to do a contour integral. So let me draw a contour first. So I make a cut. This is the real axis. This width is actually very small, but I've just zoomed it for you so that you can get a look at it. So this is the contour. The important point is that alpha is not an integer. So let me write down, suppose you consider, you take a point z on this outer contour. Let z be a point on this contour. And from the center, this radius is r, the radius of the outer contour, which is a circle. And this radius, this is capital R, and this is small r. Okay? So for points on this outer contour, so let me call this contour as CR. And so we are going like this, then coming like this, then you are going like this, then you are coming out like this. So this is your full contour. Okay? Let me label these points. This is A, this is B, this is C, this is D. And this smaller circle, let me call it as C small r. So if Z is a point on this outer contour, then you can write it write Z as r into the power of I theta, right? But now you see there is something very interesting that is happening, because you please note the integrand. It is Z to the power of alpha minus 1, and alpha is not an integer. So at this point theta is 0, so Z is basically r at this point. Now you you take around. So if Z is r, so let me just write down what Z to the power of alpha minus 1 is. Z to the power of alpha minus 1 will be what? It will be r to the power of alpha minus 1, right? It follows from here. Now as you move like this and come to this point, so you are at the same point now, but you have now taken a 2 pi turn. So if you take a 2 pi turn, then what happens to Z to the power of alpha minus 1? It becomes r e to the power of I theta alpha minus 1. So this is equal to r alpha minus 1 e to the power of I. So now you have taken a 2 pi turn. So theta is 2 pi, and therefore you have 2 alpha minus 1. Okay? 2 pi I, this factor is 1. So what we finally get is r to the power of alpha minus 1 into e to the power of 2 I pi alpha. This factor is not 1 because alpha is not an integer. That is why I have specified quite a few times that alpha, remember that alpha is not an integer. If alpha is an integer, then there would have been no problem. But alpha is not an integer, and therefore this factor is not 1. So what does it tell you? It tells us basically that this function z to the power of alpha minus 1, where alpha is not an integer, is not a single valued function, it is a multi-valued function. Because when you, at this point if theta is 0, so the value of this function is r to the power of alpha minus 1. When you take a 2 pi turn, the value should be the same if it is a single valued function. But the value is not same. It is r to the power of alpha minus 1 times this factor. This factor is not equal to 1. So that is the problem. So what we do is we make a cut here. We make a cut over here, and now you go like this, come like this, take a turn, and okay, and so what we now have is the following. So if we call this full contour as C, where C is basically CR plus AB plus C small r plus CD, so that is the full contour C, then we can write that FZ dz over the full contour C is basically what? Is basically this CR FZ dz. Then it is integral A to B fz dz. Then it is integral. Please note these contours that I am drawing here. It is over c small r fz dz, and then it is c to d fz dz. Okay. Is it okay? Is this breakup fine for you? Since the function is not single valued at this point, therefore we make a cut at that point and cut it up in such a way that the contour looks like this. And on this contour, fz dz integral on this contour c is basically equal to this. But this thing you know by Cauchy residue theorem is 2 pi I summation over residues. That we already know. The left hand side is 2 pi I summation over residue by Cauchy residue theorem. What about the right hand side? Right hand side, let us consider this integral. I think you can see this part of the board. So it is C of R fz dz. Take a mod of this. So if I take a mod of this, this is nothing but less than or equal to CR mod of fz mod of dz. Okay. Let me write it here. So what we have is CR fz dz. This is less than or equal to CR mod fz mod dz. But z on this contour is r e to the power of I theta. Therefore, you know what dz is. So this is nothing but CR mod of fz. Dz will be what? Dz will be r I e to the power of I theta. I mod I is 1. E to the power of I theta mod e to the power of I theta is 1. And you will have a d theta. But what is capital R? Capital R is nothing but mod of z. Right? And you remember the condition that we imposed? We imposed that what we want to do is finally is take this radius capital R go to infinity. Okay? That is mod z going to infinity. So in the limit mod z going to infinity, z f of z goes to 0. Therefore this term is 0 in the limit mod z goes to infinity. Okay? And similarly, you can show that in the limit mod z going to 0, that is small r going to 0 for points on this circular contour CR. So for mod z equal to small r, that going to 0. Once again, this integral, this one, the contour integral of f of z on this smaller circle C small r, this will be 0. So both these contributions are 0. So both of them are gone. So what we finally have is the following. We have this 2 pi I summation over residue is nothing but a to b f of z dz plus integral c to d f of z dz. So this is what we have. Okay. Let us take this one, this particular integral. If you take that integral, what we shall find is the following. See, we have taken the limit r going to infinity, capital R going to infinity. That means this point is also at infinity, the point A. So it is integration from A to B, and we have taken this smaller going to 0 limit. That means B is at the center. So this has shrunk to a point. So B goes to 0. So this integral can be written down as integral infinity to 0 f of z on this along AB is nothing but g of x into x to the power of alpha minus 1 e to the power of 2 pi I alpha, because that is what we calculated. This is z to the power of alpha minus 1, z to the power of alpha minus 1 on this line. Here the value of theta is 2 pi at this on this line, and therefore z to the power of alpha minus 1 is nothing but this thing into e to the power of this. But this is on this line, so along this line x changes. Therefore, it is x to the power of alpha minus 1. You already have gx, because f of z is nothing but z to the power of alpha minus 1 into g of z. So g of z becomes g of x, and you have this term dx. And what about this term? This is integration from 0 to infinity. So this is 0 to infinity. And once again, f of z along the real line will be nothing but g of x. But here theta is 0, right? And therefore z to the power of alpha minus 1 along this thing will be x to the power of alpha minus 1 only. There will be no contribution from this term. This term contributes only when theta is equal to 2 pi. Here theta is 0. So we have this. Okay? You can take this factor outside, and you can just swap the limits with at the cost of a minus sign. So we'll get this. And therefore what we have is 1 minus e to the power of 2 pi I alpha integral 0 to infinity g of x to the power of alpha minus 1 dx. And therefore this result follows from here. So this integral is this thing divided by this thing. Is this okay? Did you follow the evaluation of this integral?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Please, if there are doubts, we'll go through the arguments once again, and it will be clear. So this is a very special type of an integral that we have computed, and if gx, as I mentioned, is a rational function of x with no singularities or poles on the real x-axis, so you can now put in forms of gx, whatever forms of gx you like, and it must obey the conditions that when you analytically continue it to the complex plane, then it must the conditions should hold. That is, z f of z should go to 0 uniformly as mod z tends to infinity, as well as mod z going to 0. So if these conditions hold, and g of x does not have any singularity on the real x-axis, then the value of this integral, with alpha not being an integer, is basically this. So you put in something over here, you just calculate the residues of this function. So this function becomes, in the complex plane, it becomes g of z. You calculate the residues of that function, put in the value of the residue, and the answer of the integral will be this. So this is a very general result. And you can try some problems at home. You take any book and try to solve some problems. Okay. So this is the last thing that I wanted to do with you in complex variable analysis, because we do not have any more classes left, because after this class we will probably have only 3 more classes. So today is Friday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we will have 3 more classes left. So what we shall start today is the following. We shall start with discussing about differential operators. So there are many related concepts that one should learn. For example, what are vector spaces? So I'm sure you must have learned what are vector spaces, and then there are many related concepts, mathematical concepts, which such as metric spaces, topological vector spaces, things like that, and then Banach spaces and Hilbert spaces. So Hilbert spaces, as I mentioned earlier, that they form the foundation of mathematical foundation of quantum mechanics. But we shall not have much time to talk about these things in this course. What we shall do is we shall take a shortcut and try to discuss about differential operators, adjoint operators, self-adjoint operators, and things like that. So first of all, let me tell you what a differential operator is. So I shall give you a definition. A differential operator So a differential operator are you familiar with bracket algebra? Have you done bracket algebra in quantum mechanics?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. A differential operator L hat, we shall denote it by L hat, is a pair L hat x comma b, where L hat x so is a pair L hat is a formal differential where L hat x is a formal. You will understand the meaning of all these things. Is a formal differential operator, and B is a set of homogeneous boundary conditions. So this is something very important. So the differential operator L hat is basically a pair. Usually when we talk about, when we learned about derivatives, about taking derivatives, all these are operators, right? ddx acting on a function. So ddx is an operator which acts on some function to give you another function. So that is what we understand by a differential operator. But strictly speaking or rigorously speaking, a differential operator is something more than that. What is a differential operator? It is basically some operator, some kind of a derivative operator that you have. Is a formal differential operator, and it is also, it has a component which is called B, and it is a set of boundary conditions. So together with the differential operator which acts on some functions, along with the set of homogeneous boundary conditions, these two things comprises what is known as a differential operator. So boundary conditions are also very important. So from this, you can understand that L hat, this operator acts on elements of a Hilbert space. So this will act on elements. I'm sure that by now you must be knowing it is a Hilbert space, because this you must have learned in quantum mechanics. So L hat basically acts on elements of a vector of a Hilbert space, which is nothing but a vector space, a complete vector space with an inner product defined on it. Okay. So this acts on elements of a Hilbert space, and what is more important is that the existence of these boundary conditions, homogeneous boundary conditions, which is an integral part in the definition of a differential operator, because a differential operator is an operator along with the set of boundary conditions. The existence of boundary conditions tells us that this differential operator L hat does not act on the full Hilbert space, on all the elements of the Hilbert space. This is something very important. It only acts on those elements of the Hilbert space which satisfy or which obey the boundary conditions. So this operator do not act on all the elements, rather it acts on a subset. So the Hilbert space I denote it by H. So L hat does not act on all the elements of H, rather it acts on a subset of elements of H. So DL hat is a subset of this full Hilbert space. And what does this subset comprise of? This subset comprise of vectors in the Hilbert space or elements in the Hilbert space which obey the boundary conditions B. That is very important. So this L hat acts on DL hat. So DL hat is the set of elements in H which obey the boundary conditions B. It does not act on all whatever elements. There are more elements in the Hilbert space, but L hat do not act on those elements because those elements do not satisfy the boundary conditions. So what is this subset called? This subset is called the domain of L hat. This subset is called the domain of L hat. This is this concept of domain of a differential operator, and this actually arises from the existence of the homogeneous boundary conditions, and therefore this concept of domain of a differential operator is very, very important. Never forget this concept. This is a very important concept. So what is the domain of a differential operator? It is a subset of the Hilbert space which obey the boundary conditions. Now let's proceed from here. We have L hat, and we shall now smuggle in a little bit of bracket notation, okay? Because you are familiar with bracket notation. You are familiar with this ket and bra notation, right?
Yes, sir.
So L hat acting on ket U, and you take a position representation. Let me call this position representation. This is the bra X, okay? And what is this? This is nothing but L hat X U X for ket U belonging to U. So what does this equation mean? This is not an equation basically, it is some kind of a representation. This tells us that L hat can be represented by L hat X. The operator L hat can be represented by L hat X, provided L hat X acts on functions U of X. This ket U was not a function, this was an abstract vector in the Hilbert space. But when you take a representation, that is, if you have ket U and take a representation bra X, this ket U is an element of the abstract Hilbert space U. Now you take a representation of that vector with X, what you have is U of X. So this gives you a function. So this function basically represents this vector in the Hilbert space U. This is a representation, and this is a functional representation. You are representing a vector by a function. So you have a Hilbert space which consists of functions, which consists of vectors, arbitrary abstract vectors, ket denoted by kets, and you have functions corresponding to each vector in the Hilbert space. You have a function. This also forms a, this is also a Hilbert space, and this is a function space basically. This is a function space. Okay. So L hat is represented by L hat x, provided L hat x acts on functions u of x, and this u, where this u of x represents these ket vectors belonging to the Hilbert space U. And similarly, if I take L hat dagger acting on V x, take a bra x, this is what? This is L hat dagger x V of x, where ket V belongs to V. Okay. So here also L hat dagger is represented by L hat dagger x, but only when L hat dagger x acts on functions V of x that represents the vectors ket V belonging to the vector space V, or Hilbert space, whatever you call. Okay. So these are some. So I've smuggled in some bracket notation for you, and I have introduced the concept of a differential operator and the concept of boundary conditions and the concept of domain of a differential operator. This is very important. Now we have something. So you see that we have a differential operator L hat and we have a differential operator L hat dagger. This L hat dagger is said to be the adjoint of L hat. This is the adjoint of L hat. So the question is, how do you know, if I give you a form of a differential operator, if I give you a L hat, can you evaluate what is the adjoint of that L hat? How do you evaluate or find out the adjoint of that operator? There is a way in which you can do it. So let us see how you can do it. So what we shall have is the formal adjoint, this L hat dagger, which has a representation L hat dagger x when it acts on functions V of x. This you can find it out from a particular identity. This is formally defined, or it has the property that W of x V star x L hat x U of x minus L hat dagger x V of x whole star U of x is equal to dq U V star dx. So this is how the adjoint is. You can find out the adjoint from this kind of a relation. The question is, given a differential operator, how can you cast? So if I give you a differential operators, for example ddx, and it acts on u of x, it acts on v star, and v star x is on the left hand side, then can you cast, or can you get a relation of this form? If you have some confusion, the confusion will be clear in a moment. I will give you an example right at this moment. So let us do the example, and then this thing will be clear. There are quite a few things that I have not mentioned here in this relation. This W of x is called a weight function. Is called a weight function. It is basically a real function. It is a real function of x. So x is this thing is a real function. X is a real variable. We are concentrating on real variables, and not only that, this is a real function of x. It's called a weight function, and the property of this weight function is that it is positive definite in some closed interval a comma b. So what do I mean by that? X belonging to this closed interval a b, that is a less than or equal to x less than or equal to b. This is how you denote a closed interval. For x belonging to this interval, wx is a positive definite function. So it may have a, so it may look something like this. Okay. It can have isolated zeros in this, at some intermediate point within this closed interval, but it is positive definite and it is zero. It can have zeros at this point. So that is not a problem. So this is a weight function. Okay. What is this q? This q of ux v star x is a bilinear in u and v star. So the most general form of this q can be something like this: u v star plus v u dv star dx plus c du dx v star plus v du dx dv star dx. So this is the most general form of a bilinear q, in bilinear in u and v star. This can be the most general form of q. And to find out so given a differential operator Lx, the formal adjoint of that operator can be found out from this relation. And this kind of a relation is called Lagrange identity. Lagrange identity. This is something very, very important, or very nice, or very beautiful also. So this identity is called a Lagrange identity. And let's take an example at this point. Let's consider L at x to be ddx. The question is to find the adjoint operator L at dagger x. Okay? So what we shall do is, we shall take v star x ddx ux, which is nothing but this term. And we shall take the weight function to be 1, say. Wx is say 1 in this case. So forget about the weight function, is 1. So let us consider this expression. Lx is ddx. Now you can write this expression as ddx v star x ux, and now you have to subtract dv star dx ux. So this is an identity. This is not an equation. This is an identity. This is the same thing that we do when we carry out integration by parts, right? So v star ddx ux, which is this expression, is nothing but this minus this. Therefore, I can take this term on this side, so I can write this as plus dv star x dx ux. Okay, and now this expression is exactly in this form because ddx is nothing but L at x ux, and I can put a minus sign because I want to evaluate the adjoint from this kind of a relation. That this is how the adjoint is defined basically. So I can write, so this left hand side is basically nothing but L hat x dagger b of x whole star u of x, and that is equal to d dx of q. So you have this and you have this. So compare the two. What is q? Q from here, if you compare, you will get V star Q. And what is this thing? Minus Lx dagger V of x star is equal to dV star dx. Just by comparing this with this, therefore I can get rid of the star from both sides. So this is gone. So minus I can take it on that side. Therefore, what is L hat x dagger? This implies L hat x dagger is nothing but minus of dx. So this is the adjoint of the operator dx. Is it okay? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But there is one more thing to, so what we have seen just now is that for this operator, this is your Lagrange identity, this Q is this, and the adjoint operator is this. So now, if you have understood how you can calculate or evaluate the adjoint operator given a differential operator, now we will do something which is known as the Green's identity, which follows from the Lagrange identity in a very simple way. So this is your Lagrange identity. Now just integrate this over the closed interval. So this will give us V star x, L hat x, U of x, minus integral a to b d of x, L hat dagger x, v of x, star, and that is equal to so you can see that this is a boundary term, total derivative term. So I can straight away integrate this thing and you will get q ux v star x from x is equal to a to b. Okay. So this is equal to q u at b, v star at b, minus q u at a, v star at b. Okay. So the Lagrange identity, this minus this, now you have integrated the Lagrange identity over the closed interval a to b. So this gives you the Green's identity. And that is equal to this thing. Now if you want that this boundary term vanishes, if you want that, if you impose, so you, by requiring that this boundary term vanishes, it means that you are imposing boundary conditions. So then this is equal to 0. You write down or you impose your boundary conditions in such a way that this boundary term vanishes. Then this is equal to 0. Then this is equal, then this minus this is equal to 0. This is called the Green's identity. Green's identity, where you have required imposed boundary conditions so that the boundary term vanishes. So this is called the Green's identity. Okay. Now, once again, we shall use some bracket notation to write this in a nice form. Let us look at this term. Okay, by the way, in the Lagrange identity, you also have a weight function. I missed the weight function. So keep in mind that you have a weight function W of x. This is the most general. The weight function can be 1, as we have just seen in the previous example. So please keep the weight function. Let us look at the first term, a to b d of x, the weight function W of x, v star x, L hat x, u of x. This term, you can write it in the following way: a to b d of x, wx, v star x. V star x is nothing but bra v x, right? Because v of x is bra x get v. If you take a complex conjugate, this will be a complex conjugate, and therefore this will become vx. So v star x, you can write it in this way. And what is L hat x ux? If you remember, it is bra x L hat u. Is this okay? Is this clear? Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
If you have doubts, you can ask. If you have any doubts in the steps, you can ask. And this we shall write it down as in a notation for our notation in a different notation. What we shall do is we shall write it down as bra v L hat x, L hat u. So the way we write down this full expression is the following. This is how this notation is defined. This expression corresponds to this thing. So you have a get u L hat bra v. This expression basically means this thing. It is very similar to quantum mechanics, but the only thing is that you also keep a generalized function there. You make it more general, because I will just show you in a minute that is very similar to what we do in quantum mechanics. In quantum mechanics, suppose you have L hat get u bra v, okay, which is this expression. So how can you write it? You can basically introduce a complete set of position eigenstates, right? And what is that? What does that mean? Basically, you are introducing something like this. This is a completeness relation involving the position eigenstates. So you can write this down as bra v dx x bra x L hat u, because this is identity. Now you can take the integral outside, so this becomes dx v x x L hat u, but this is equal to integral dx. This is v star x, as I mentioned just now, and this is what? This is L hat x u of x, which is this. But the only thing is that you can see that there is no weight function here. Okay, there is no weight function sitting here, but in general there can be a weight function. So that is why you put a weight function there. In general, you can have a weight function also. For example, this completeness relation, in the completeness relation, there may be some function sitting over here. So you have something ket x bra x is equal to 1. So that is the weight function. So this is a relation. So this is basically this thing. You see that in quantum mechanics, this thing is basically nothing but this thing without the weight function. But here, this is a more general definition that this thing is basically nothing but this thing. You have this along with a weight function. It is basically a generalization of what you have in quantum mechanics. So it embodies everything. If you want, you can put the weight function to be equal to 1. Then it agrees with, then whatever you do in quantum mechanics, it agrees with everything. Okay. So what we have seen is that you can write this expression in this way. Now, let us look at this term. Let us look at the second term. Let us take this term. So this term is a to b dx wx wellhead dagger x okay. Now this I can write it down in the following way. U of x, this you can write it down as x u. And what is this particular object? This particular object, if you remember, it is L hat dagger ket v bra x. That is L hat dagger x dx. And complex conjugate of that. So this is what we have. Okay. And now you can see that you can write this down as a to b dx, the weight function. This I can write it down as u x complex conjugate, this particular thing. Ket u bra x is nothing but bra u ket x complex conjugate. And you already have this thing, x L hat dagger v complex conjugate. You can combine both these things. We can write this down as a to b dx wx u x is full complex conjugate. Wx, I told you that it is a real function. Therefore, I can write this down as, you see this part now. So this can be written as integral a to b dx wx, this full thing u x, this will have dagger v, this full thing, and then the full thing complex conjugate. You take the complex conjugate outside the integral, because wx is unaffected by the complex conjugate because it is a real function, and now you just take complex conjugate of this thing. But what is this full thing? You have a notation for that. You can write it in a nice notation. You can write it as L hat dagger bra u ket v complex conjugate. Okay, so this expression you can write it in this way. This is a notation, so that is why I have put a equivalent sign. So this thing you write in a compact notation like this. Is it okay? So what we have found is the following, that this minus this was equal to 0 because the surface term is 0, the boundary term is gone. If you choose your boundary conditions appropriately, then what you have is the following. You have the following relation, that v L hat u minus u L hat dagger v whole star is equal to 0. Okay, and therefore this is equal to this if the boundary conditions are gone. Another notation for this thing, as I mentioned, that this has a meaning only in terms of that integral. Another notation for this is v comma L hat u. This is another notation, and notation for this full thing is basically L hat dagger v u. So this is how, so another notation in terms of brackets, rounded brackets is this thing v comma lu, and this thing, this was in terms of bra and cats, but this is now in terms of this rounded brackets with a comma. So this is another notation for this thing. So this full thing can be represented like this thing. This is a different notation, v comma lu, and this thing is l hat dagger v comma u. Where what is v comma lu? You have the meaning of this expression as dx, wx, v star x, l hat x, u of x, a to b. This is the meaning of this expression. And similarly for this thing. So this is l hat dagger v comma u. Yes. Is this clear? Is this okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very nice. So now I will tell you one more thing and stop for today. I will tell you what a symmetric operator is. What is a symmetric operator? A symmetric operator, if L hat is equal to L hat or L hat dagger is equal to L hat, then this operator L hat is said to be a symmetric operator. If L hat is equal to L hat dagger, then it is called a, so it basically means that if the adjoint is equal to the operator itself, then it is a symmetric operator, but not Hermitian. Mind you, this is not the definition of a Hermitian operator. There is something more to it that we shall discuss in the next class, in the next discussion on Monday. So this is the definition of a symmetric operator. So for a symmetric operator, what we have is the following, that p comma lu is nothing but lv comma u, or in this language you know what it means. So if this is true, then this is a symmetric operator. Okay? So if you do not have any questions at this point, so let us stop for today. Please go through the things that I have told you. Also go through the example that I have told you. And please try to follow whatever I am telling you in these classes. We will have 3 more classes. So please try to follow. Don't look at any book for the time being. Just follow what I am telling you in these classes. So let's stop for today. Thank you very much. And please, as I mentioned, you were asking for the videos. If you want the videos, you just send me your email ID, then I can forward it to you.
Sir, I have already mailed you.
But I did not receive it. I did not get any mail.
Sir, it's sunandan.mangopadhyay@gmail.com.
But I did not get any mail. Send it once again. Please take care of this spelling. Otherwise, it will not come to me.
Okay, sir.
Or sir, maybe you can share the links to the classroom, Google Classroom.
I can do that, but I don't know how to do it. That is the problem. So you please send me a ID. You send me an email, then I can try to share it.
Oh, okay.